Hello everyone, welcome to Dice Commando and Go Again, a fabulous cast. Today we have special guest Simon Denning, who top 8'd the UK Nationals with his Earth Briar list. This was one of the first ones we saw through the season, still one of the more elemental focused ones that we've seen in all of the top 8s. So he's going to be joining us today for a rundown. A huge shout out to our channel members for supporting what we do here. If you want to get involved with the channel and the Dice Commando community, please consider joining as a channel member. Remember, these videos are only possible with your support. You can show that support with a like, a subscribe, and by leaving us a comment and sharing your feedback. Community first, and go Commando. Hey folks, welcome back to Dice Commando. Simon, welcome back as well. This is your second time here as well. You were stab kicking before, and this time you're just throwing Earthstones at us. So how's it going?
Yeah, good. Thank you. Thanks for having me back. It's really good to be on the podcast again, and yeah, I can't wait to get into it today. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Well, congratulations on the top 8 finish in the UK. That was a fun time to watch everything and then roll right from that to see how that was going to affect the the USA Nationals. And it's been a couple weeks of fab.
Yeah, it was really strange being the first national event globally. We were expecting New Zealand to go first, and obviously they've had trouble with lockdown. And having that spotlight had pros and cons, shall we say. It's been an interesting ride.
Sure. So before we get into talking about your run, your list, and then kind of how you got there, I have a fun story. So I was at my armory last night at Gongai, and I was running Prism because I haven't actually run her in a tournament yet. So I was running Prism and ran up against an Earth Briar in the final. Ooh, and I just got demolished. Okay. I mean, it was a train wreck, right? I just got demolished, right? And at the end, I was talking. So it was Billy Horn, really good guy and really good player. I probably wouldn't have beat him anyway. But afterwards, he was telling me that he's like, yeah, I was using the deck lists from the top 8 nationals at the UK, and I just pared it down for a Blitz. And I was like, oh, that's funny because I'm actually interviewing Simon tomorrow morning.
Oh, very nice. Yeah.
So, yeah, your deck's already making its round.
Yeah, I can see that it would work in Blitz as well. I think the generic Lightning Briar is also making the rounds in Blitz. It's an interesting proposition. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been, so far what we've seen is it can outrace Ira. So
yeah, I'm hearing that too, which means probably not worth me getting my Ira out in the bag again. I might just pare this one down. We'll see.
Yeah. So I think I know there's still some nationals going on right now. We actually saw this morning when I woke up. So today, overnight, whatever you want to call it, the Polish nationals. And I'll put up the picture of the guy who won Polish nationals. I'm gonna slay his name. But dude is freaking awesome. Yeah. Like if he's not a member of a rock band, he's doing something wrong.
Absolutely, he looks cool as
So, but congratulations.
I know the Canadian nationals are currently top 8ing right now as well.
Oh, okay. Okay. So yeah, we're shooting this at midday Sunday. So that makes sense. Do you know what's going on over there?
I've seen that Dante Delfico is in the top 8. Good friend of our podcast and the UK scene, and a good friend of his, Demos, is playing Oldhim. He's managed to get in the top 8. So I think it's 5 or 6 Briars, and Oldhim and a Lexi, I think is what I've seen so far.
Yeah, very, very interesting. Yeah, I know we're going off topic here, but we saw Oldhim take the calling in the US, which I know you and I talked a lot on the Discord kind of going through spoiler season. I know we were all scared about how good Oldhim was going to be.
Yeah.
The concern being, was he going to be able to get through without people just stalling him out? And apparently people have figured it out. So
it's coming. If it hasn't already been figured out, it's coming. I think people still go to time with it a lot, and the disruption and the pace of the game, especially as the player, has to be played fast, but you also rely on your opponent playing at a reasonable speed, which isn't always the case. Not for any bad reasons, just that it's a difficult matchup and you want to put a lot of thought into blocking correctly. So it is coming. I think people are playing faster with it and doing more damage with it, but it's as with any meta, I think we've seen aggro comes first and then the control and the mid range adapt to that and come later.
Have you given that any reps? I haven't played with him at all. I mean, aside from
No,
limited.
I don't actually have the Ram's head either, so I haven't managed to get any significant reps on that, which is a shame. I don't think it suits my personal play style either. I think I'm not a particularly good patient control player. I'd much prefer the mid-range pivot deck, which we can talk about when we look at the Briar deck.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, fair enough. Yeah. So I mean, that's a good lead in, right? So let's go ahead and we'll throw up your deck list. Now, I usually make a fancy graphic, but since it's actually on the LSS website, I figured I just use that one, right? So
it's a surreal experience seeing a name on the LSS website as well. I must say, it was when I first clicked on it, I was like, "Wow, I made that."
I mean, it's pretty cool how they. I think it's pretty cool, and they're getting them turned around within 3-4 days. I mean, it's pretty impressive.
I must admit that the post tournament, shout out to LSS actually, the post tournament bits and bobs, the prizes and stuff was all turned around pretty quickly, and they've been great to deal with. It's just been a good experience all around. So thank you.
Yeah, no, that's a good shout out. Yeah, I didn't even think about that stuff that could. Yeah, I've been impressed all the way around the way they handle it, but they're clearly focused on it. So why don't you go ahead and give us a quick rundown of the list? Obviously, people can read, so you don't necessarily have to go through, but you can kind of hit the main points, and I don't know. Yeah, just give us your thoughts on it.
So I think, like as you said, thank you, and it's probably the most elemental Briar list that I've seen, and shout out to Jason Hamer, who was my sort of testing deck building buddy on this. We crunched a lot of numbers. We went through. We've got multiple spreadsheets and multiple versions of the deck, trying to get what exactly we wanted. It started with a few generics and a bit of lightning and a bit of earth, and we very quickly realized that it wasn't quite consistent enough for what we were trying to do. And we've gone full into earth elemental fuse. With some big attacks in there. And I would say it's a very mid-range deck. It's a very, like we said, pivot deck. So you can soak up a lot of pressure with those embodiments of earth. You can take turns off to make embodiments of lightning, and you can really hit hard with the combinations of things like Channel Mine Heroic, Command and Conquer, Autumn's Touch, Bramble Spark. There are a lot of cards that add damage, a lot of non-attack actions that add damage, and a lot of big attacks in there. So just right from the beginning, I would say that the basic turn for this deck is non-attack action, 2-cost attack, like Command and Conquer, Burgeoning, Rites of Replenishment, followed by hitting with the Rosetta Thorn for 2 damage, Arcane, and 2 physical. So you're coming in for maybe 10 to 15, 10 to 16 with the attack, because of your buffs, and then you're coming in for another 4 damage with the sword, and that might take a couple of goes to set up, turns to set up, but it is quite consistent, and you can fuse things like Bramble Spark and Stir the Wildwood fairly consistently.
So when you say taking turns to set up, right? Is it basically an on turn, off turn generally? Is that how you're playing it, or?
Yeah, I think you might, as I say, if you have an on turn, you've scored some arcane damage, you've scored some physical damage, and maybe made 1 to 2 embodiments of earth. So then all of your non-attack actions block for 1 or 2 more. If you're looking at non-attack actions like Channel Mount Heroic, what else have we got? Force of Nature, Whisper of the Oracle. They're all 3-block non-attack actions. If they're blocking for 5 each, then your off turn might be block 2 big attacks and then come back with a CNC for 6. That's a good off turn, right? It's threatening their hand, it's threatening their arsenal, and you're still threatening the damage. At worst, I think you save a blue and you come in with 1 Rune Chant and Thorn for 2. Still threatening 3 damage, but from 2 different sources. So just chipping through. Um, maybe keeping a card for Arsenal, and then the next turn you've soaked up some damage, so you've got a bit of a life lead, and then you can come back with your big buffed attack and then the Thorn. So yeah, one on turn, one off turn, maybe slight variations in that ratio, but it's definitely not an all-out aggro deck. It can soak up a lot of damage, and I would say matchups like the generic Lightning Briar deck that we've seen are actually in my deck's favor, or in our deck's favor, should I say, because there are so many ways to block for 4 per attack. So you can block multiple attacks with just 1 card each.
Okay. Yeah, and you actually spoke to one of my questions. The Whisperer or the Oracle was going to be one of my questions as to the include choice there. So is it just purely that it's a blue that blocks for 3?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a blue non-attack action that blocks for 3, and it does a huge amount of work. Actually, I wouldn't say it's the MVP of the deck by any means, but it does a huge amount of work for a common card. You'll notice that there's quite a few blues there. I run between 24 and 26, I think. Maybe we cut it down to 23 and 25. With So Tomorrow being the sideboarded blue, but it generally, this deck requires 1 blue per hand to get everything going. So if you can guarantee that, which we pretty much have, I mean nothing's guaranteed in cards, right? But it's fairly consistently 1 blue per turn. And even if you have multiple blues in hand, you still have blues like Autumn's Touch and Break Ground. Although they cost 3, they still do 5 damage. So it's not a bad threat to come back with if you've just kept 2 blues in hand.
Okay. And then Channel Mount Heroic is, I mean, it's pretty obvious why that's in there. But for someone who hasn't gotten reps with this, the Channel Mount Heroic seems a little challenging for the setup. So are you playing that on an off turn, or are you playing it and going on the same turn? How does that work?
Obviously, depending on what you've got in hand, the brilliant thing about Channel Mount Heroic is it's a non-attack action with Go Again in itself. So if you can play a Bramble Spark out, so a red Bramble Spark, you can fuse it with the Channel Mount Heroic. You can then play out the Channel Mount Heroic with a blue, and then you can play a big attack with another blue. So you may have had a card in Arsenal to make that possible. But even if you're just going, you just need 5 cards for that. So even if you're not playing the Bramble, even if you're just playing out the Channel Mount Heroic into a CNC for 9, no Go Again, that's still a pretty good turn. And you've pitched the Earth card that you need to keep Channel Mount Heroic alive for that first turn. So you're getting value out of it for the 1 turn, keeping it alive for the next turn. And then you can really decide when you get your next hand whether you're going to have that off turn that we spoke about, or whether you're just going to go soak up some damage and come big the next turn. I can consistently, with the deck, keep Channel Mount Heroic out for 2 turns, as in play it and then keep it for the next turn, and then have it for a 3rd turn. So generally attacking 2 or 3 turns with the Channel Mount Heroic is possible with this deck. But it's not just the fact that you can play it out as a non-attack action at the beginning of your turn that makes it useful. And if you see, we have the Creepers. We don't go down the Snapdragon Scalers route as the generic Briar deck does, because all of our attacks generally cost 2. The Spellbound Creepers are great because you can then, if you've got the resources, you can play something like a Command and Conquer, and then once they've defended, add Channel Mount Heroic as a non-attack action at instant speed in their reaction window when they don't have a chance to defend any further with it. So you can't defend react to CNC's chain link. So it's going to hit, it's going to threaten their arsenal. And there are similar interactions with things like Plunder Run, where you can play it in the reaction step and then guarantee the card draw unless they've got a defense reaction in hand. That sort of interaction took me a while to get after many reps with the deck, because you're generally trying to balance your resources, and as I said, blues are very important, blue pitch are very important. So it's a really fun deck to play. I really enjoy the pivot nature of it. I really enjoy coming in for 12, 14, 16 with 1 attack, followed by the threat of the Thorn with Go Again after, or from Go Again afterwards. And it's not just the amount of damage, it's the multiple sources. So Sink Below, what I'm talking about, Explosive Growth, for example, does one arcane, multiple physical, and if you fuse it and you don't block it, then you're going to add to your next attack, whether that's the Thorn or otherwise, it adds to any attack on the chain. So yeah, it's great.
Okay, so Creepers, actually, I think that's a really good one for people who maybe haven't run that before. So I'll put the card up in editing, but can you kind of walk us through, just from a technical standpoint, how and why that works to add to the current card that's being played?
Yeah, so Spellbound Creepers is, when I initially saw it, I thought it was quite underwhelming. I thought the amount of text on the card was a bit ridiculous, and I just wondered how it would be utilized. Having played with it now, I definitely see its advantage. For the cost of one resource, as long as you've attacked or defended with an attack action card, it allows you to play your next non-attack action as an instant. Now, you can do that to add power to your attack, like we talked about with Channel Mount Heroic. You can do it to add a card draw effect if you use something like Plunder Run. Or you can just use it with something like Whisper of the Oracle, because it's a non-attack action that has Go Again, to replenish your action point if you didn't have Go Again in the first place. So you don't need to play multiple non-attack actions if you have the Spellbound Creepers and the resources to play a non-attack action at instant speed. What can be really interesting is playing a non-attack action pump, say Bramble Spark, into a big attack like Stir the Wildwood, triggering the Creepers to play another non-attack action as an instant to give you Go Again, but then also to give you an embodiment of lightning for your next turn. So you've got Go Again this turn, but you've also then got Go Again for your next turn with an embodiment that sticks around. You can use the Go Again this turn to come in with the Thorn, and then you can use your Go Again next turn to ensure that you hit with the Thorn as well. So if you use it correctly, you're threatening much more damage from the Thorn, because you're getting your arcane damage and your physical damage later on, but also multiple turns. So if you think ahead and you plan ahead, you can really optimize the damage output from this deck.
Yeah, that is dirty, right? So just so everyone's on the same page, it being an instant means obviously you can play it at any time that you have priority, but remember that if the reason, Simon, or the reason, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, the reason you were referring it specifically to CNC was because they couldn't get defense reacts. Because on the timing window, if you attack and then they get to defend, you can play it as an instant, but it's effectually it's in your attack action window. Or attack reaction window.
Yeah.
Because if they don't then defend react, if they don't defend react, it immediately closes. You can't react to them not defend reacting. So you have to play it first, and that's why with CNC it works, because they don't have that ability, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And we, as we said with Plunder Run, if they've not defended an attack, and you add a Plunder Run, and they can't defend with defense reacts, or they don't have defense reacts, then you're guaranteeing yourself a card draw with the Go Again from the Plunder Run as well. So you're getting multiple effects. The downside is it costs one, and once you've used it, you start building these flow counters. So you have to do arcane damage to keep them alive, and you have to do arcane damage every turn after you use them the first time. So it's not just the turns that you use them that it checks every turn. But if you're consistently getting the Thorn working, most people aren't running more than Arcane Barrier 1, so you can use them once or twice with relative immunity from that, as long as you're using the Thorn. And the other positive is it still blocks for one. So if you envisage a turn where you're going to have to block up and you're not going to be able to use the Thorn next turn, you can just use them to block and get that value from them as well. So I would still say it's a relatively underutilized card in Runeblade. I think Viscera uses them more, but definitely in this Earth deck, they bring something special.
Well, I mean, most people are like you would reference Snapdragon. Snapdragon's pops and you get to do it once. If you can get one out of this and defend for one, that's arguably better, right?
More, yeah.
So
it becomes a bit more like bolters for Dorinthea, right? So, but you don't have to have the hit. You get the go again, and you get the one block, and you could potentially use them multiple times. So, it takes elements from lots of different leg pieces of armor, and if you use it correctly, you should have it up for multiple turns.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, your point about Plunder Run on that, because that was another question I had originally before I got smacked last night, was how are you swinging? I mean, that was fundamentally the question I had. I was like, well, how is he doing this and swinging with the Thorn? Well, I get it. You get your card draw to pay for it off Plunder Run. So, yeah. So, okay. So kind of in the intro, you and I were talking a bit about kind of the development and how you got here. And you said you did a lot of math, and you don't need to walk us through the math, as that's IP. But I'm just curious how you ended up on as many. How did you end up fundamentally on the ratio of everything? Right, there's a lot of ratio mixes here, right?
There are a lot of ratios, and when we first started building this deck, I hadn't quite considered how many ratios there were, but having a discussion with a few of the New Zealand guys that I play with occasionally on TTS, they were like, well, you just need to, at the time they had their nationals coming up, so they weren't willing to share their idea, like their deck ideas, but they would just like, take a look at this ratio and this ratio and just make sure you're happy with it. And if you look at Runeblades up until now, we've had Viserai relies on the non-attack action ratio with attack actions, so that you can build rune chants and you can consistently activate the weapon, whether it's the Nebula Blade or get go again. And sometimes you get a full hand of non-attacks, and sometimes you get a full hand of attacks, and you don't quite get it to gel. That was taken a step further with Chane, when you had not only your non-attack actions and attack actions to boost damage and go again, but you also had to think about the ratio of blood deck cards to non-blood deck cards, so you could use stuff from Banish. But now we've got non-attack actions and attack actions. We've got earth cards and non-earth cards. We've got whether you're going to have defense reactions in there or not. Again, that's a bit more generic. Whether you're going to have lightning fuse cards or non-lightning fuse cards, and then you've got the elemental versus the earth, or elemental versus lightning argument as well. So there are 3 or 4 different ratios that we're trying to fit here.
And let's not forget pitch.
And pitch, so you need your blue ratios as well. So for and we've also got the ratio of 3 block non-attack actions as well. So we've got 10 of those in the deck, and they, as I said, they do a huge amount of work. But we settled on for each individual sideboard, we settled on approximately a 30% earth card ratio, and as close as we could get to 50-50 on the non-attacks and the attack actions. So it varies from matchup to matchup. For example, against Bravo, we run a big deck of 68 cards to try and avoid the fatigue element, but we run cards like Rites of Replenishment and Pulse of Cannonholds in there all the time to try and get cards back when we need them. So Tomorrow goes in against Bravo and Guardians to try and get cards back. So not only is it a big deck, it's also trying to replenish cards through those effects. But the inclusion of defense reactions, we've got 6 in the total deck, puts the non-attack action to attack action ratio slightly off, and you have to take that into account. And you have to play slightly slower, which you should do against Bravo anyway, just to try and even things out and make things a bit more consistent. You have to be quite careful about what you put in Arsenal. Is it better to put a non-attack action in Arsenal so that you've got an extra one you can use towards an embodiment of lightning, or is it better to put an attack action because actually having no attack actions in your hand is possible and it gives you a bit of a dud hand? So it's interesting to play this deck and think about what's coming up. It's not the sort of deck you can just play out your hand and see what happens, and then get the next hand and see what happens. I think the generic Lightning Briar is a bit more like that, where you're just playing out damage. This one you have to think about turns ahead, and maybe 2 or 3 turns ahead about what's coming and what you might want to do. How many cards can you strip from the opponent's hand? How much of an window is there going to be to get damage on the next turn? How much do you need to defend on the next turn? So, yeah, I know that's gone a bit away from the ratios, but it's an evolving process, and it definitely was building the deck. And the more you look into it, the more stuff you find to tweak. And sometimes it's not right to tweak everything just because you can. But yeah, we had great fun testing. Consuming Volition was a very late addition. And it replaced, what did it replace? I think it did replace an Earth card, but its utility against Lightning Briar and Lightning Lexi particularly is unparalleled. And being able to threaten, because they're not going to block your arcane damage, being able to threaten the card disruption is huge for them. They don't want to get rid of cards, so that was an MVP in those matchups, and I think it's really helpful. The explosive growth, I think, gets looked over by a lot of people, but again, it does arcane damage and boosts not only itself but other attacks, and that can be really useful in those matchups. I think the MVP of the whole deck is probably Chanamat Heroic, and we've talked about why. And the number of the 30% Earth card ratio is in there almost purely to get Chanamat Heroic and keep it out on the board state. Because once it's out, if you manage to get 2 out, it's a good game. I think you're gonna roll people over. But just having 1 out for multiple turns, it kills Prism. It hurts the Cheerios Briar. Bravo doesn't like it. It's such a useful card, and it just changes games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I mean, nobody likes everything coming in for +3.
Yeah.
So I mean,
this is true.
Yeah.
But Prism especially. So I know we spoke in chat a while ago about how my personal testing had shaped my influence on this deck, and we've spoken before. James Berham in the group is a very good friend of mine, and we're testing practice partners. We live locally to each other, and he plays Prism a lot. And I played this deck into Prism multiple times before anything else. Having 12 6 power attacks in a deck is fantastic. Like that hurts Prism, Herald Prism especially, a lot. But getting Chanamat Heroic out, that turns 90% of my deck into, or my attack, should I say, into Herald Poppers. And that was really a good place to start with this deck. We were expecting a lot of Prism at Nationals. It didn't necessarily come to pass that happened, but the deck was built around this concept that it's going to do big damage, but it can also soak up some damage as well. Mm-hmm. And Prism does not like this matchup, I would say. As you found.
Yeah, I mean, it was ugly. It was real ugly. So I mean, you nailed it. That was kind of what you and I were talking about. I don't know, it was a week or so ago, about how our personal meta experience, our personal testing, whatever, our own personal metas, whatever that means to everybody, affects our deck building. Do you think then? So in retrospect, then, knowing if you knew 2 weeks ago what was going to be present at your nationals, do you think you would have played this different, or maybe I mean, maybe that's the question now, is given the new meta, what changes would you make, or would you, or?
I think my main takeaway, and it took me a while to process the semi-final loss. I had such a great run getting to the top 4, and I went 7-1 in CC aspect of the nationals. Obviously, there were, for those that got to the top 8, there were 6 rounds of CC and 6 rounds of draft, and then the top 8 on top. And I managed to go 7-1 with this deck in CC, which was great fun. The game against Bravo, which I lost, all credit to my opponent. He played it really, really well, and I didn't stick to my game plan. I tried to rush it. I think the mental load of being locked in all weekend I hadn't really taken that into account, and I hadn't really appreciated how much that was going to do over the 2 days. And for the guys that got to the final, I mean, good on them. They put in so much effort to get there. Definitely don't underestimate the mental load getting to that point. As I say, Consuming Volition was a late addition, and we'd seen from the calling the week before our nationals that this generic Briar list was going somewhere. So that was a bit of a late addition. I think having more reps with it would have helped with that specific card. There are a couple of tweaks that you might want to consider if you're going to take this deck away. And in all honesty, if you're going to take this deck list, please do go take it, test it, and change things that you don't like about it. I'm very much of the opinion that everyone's playstyle is slightly different, and you need to test things yourself. My deck building partner, Jason, he uses 3 blue Burgeoning instead of 3 blue Break Ground, just because it's a 2-cost, not a 3-cost. I quite like the idea of having an emergency arsenal cycle. You could argue for including the Crown of Seeds, again, for an arsenal cycle and an extra block. People have said that they don't like the blue explosive growth or the red explosive growth in the deck, and that's fine. You can change those for generic Runeblade attacks if you want, or so Arcanic Crackle being one of the ideas. Red Arcanic Crackle does 1 Arcane and 3 physical, like explosive growth, but without the upside of the fuse and the extra damage on later attacks in the chain. I'm still very comfortable. I'm still running this deck in local armories and taking it to local events and still doing okay with it. It has a good matchup into the Cheerios Briar, but it does struggle sometimes against Bravo, going to time, fatiguing, especially in the switch rounds. And I think decks like Lightning Lexi and Lightning Briar can just have god hands, and they can just overpower you with a couple of turns in a row. If they don't have any bad hands, it's really hard to keep up the momentum if you're not making those embodiments of Earth. But I think too many tweaks would take it away from the elemental Earth deck that it is. I'm not pretending to be a generic all-out aggro deck. I really wanted to play into the elemental theme of Tales of Aria, and I think we've achieved that. I never thought of myself as that sort of deck building thematic player, but actually I've really enjoyed this, and I've enjoyed what it entailed, and the reaction on people's faces when they look at you and think, oh, this is going to be another Lightning Briar matchup, and then you rock up with multiple channel Mount Heroics and big attacks, and they're like, oh, I sideboarded wrong for this. It gave me a bit of an advantage maybe as well. Sorry, that was a bit of a ramble, but
no, not at all. I do appreciate this deck more. I think that this one just feels a little more fair. I mean, it probably doesn't feel fair. Well, it doesn't feel fair when you're sitting on the end of 14 damage, but I mean, it feels a lot more fair than the go Briar version. Just because it's more elemental, right, as opposed to just everything good you could find. So that's all I mean.
Yeah, I think people probably take my Katsu play style, and I did have a very aggro Katsu deck early on in the Road to National season, and they probably thought, well, actually, Lightning Briar fits, right? You're going wide, you're doing aggro, you're presenting damage on multiple attacks per turn. But my start in Katsu was more of a mid-range Katsu to go up against things like Dorinthea in CC, which requires that patience and being able to spot the right turn to pivot and turn on the damage. And I think this has the same sort of element as that. You can soak up a lot, keep a life advantage, and then make that pivot turn to really put some pressure on. And once you start putting on the pressure, it's hard, it's easy to keep putting on that pressure. And that's another element of the deck that I've really enjoyed.
Yeah, very interesting, very, very interesting. Well, all right. I mean, I think I am out of questions. What else do you got? Yeah, anything else to chat about? We got time to chat. Well, if you do.
What? So do you know? So this is completely unrelated, but something I think that needs to be highlighted for the community is the event in Colorado recently that that went on this weekend, I think, and it was held in a brewery. This is really something that I would love to get going in my local scene. I think they called it Cokes of Commotion, and they had, I think, 60 odd players down, and they provided free copies of Cokes of Commotion. It had to be included in the deck, and they gave out free drinks whenever someone killed a player with Cokes of Commotion or played a Cokes of Commotion. I think things like that, that we have such a great community, and it's something that keeps, I don't know, presenting itself to me as how good the community is. Like, we've never met in person, Andrew, but we are part of the same online communities, and the Dice Commander community is phenomenal. There are players in Texas and you guys in Oregon and California that I've never met, but we have these chats and discussions about the game. And one day, I think when COVID has laid down a bit, settled down a bit, I can't wait until we can have like a huge international event of flesh and blood players coming in the right spirit and the right community mindset to just play awesome games, drink some awesome beer, and just get to know each other a bit better. And I think like chats like we're having today are just the first step in that building process. But it's going to get there, and it's something I really appreciate. So again, thanks for having me on. Thanks for exposing me to a different meta, to a different thinking style and deck building style. And it's just brilliant. I love the community in this game, and I want to shout out people like that are putting on these big events to get their local scenes going.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sure you saw the video, but we actually had Joey on this week before this week to kind of promote
to highlight it.
Yeah, that's I agree with you. I'd like to see more stuff like that outside of right now. Fab feels a little over, and I realize we're coming out of a big season, or we're still in the big season.
Yeah, exactly.
But it just feels a little over competitive right now. So focusing on something where we can all just sit down, have a beer, get creative, play fun decks again, that is highly desirable right now. So highly encouraged.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Anyway, thank you for having me on. Thank you for letting me ramble on. I appreciate that. And anyone that wants to come and ask me questions about the deck, I'm happy to answer them. I'm BigMedSi on Discord, and I've had many people come up and ask questions, but give me time and I'll answer them. I'll get through them.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I mean, thanks for coming, and you had to be flexible in multiple directions today for me to handle a nap time breakdown and all that. So
yeah, work and on-call. Let me just show you before we go, see if I can find the products of my labor. Was just, I don't know if you can see this one. I know it's pretty good. This card specifically in gold foil looks pretty awesome. Can't quite get the foiling on it there. But it is it's pretty special.
Nice.
And again, thanks to LSS for, I don't know, just having awesome prizes and making it worthwhile to put in the effort and the time to build decks like this to go and compete on a national level.
Yeah. So skirmish is coming up. You got any skirmish events coming?
It feels weird. I may only make one skirmish. I'm having to pay back the family commitment. My wife and my children are very understanding. I put a lot of time for testing and a lot of time for getting ready for nationals. I think I'm going to make one draft skirmish, and that's probably about it. But it's going to be fun. I think, again, these events are growing, and Blitz is a bit more of a fun endeavor for me now. I don't necessarily go in on the competitive side at the moment for Blitz, and I've taken my Shiana deck around just trying to show people what it's like to play redline aggro with Shiana, which is interesting. It doesn't win many games, but it's fun. And draft should be a bit more interesting, so we'll see how we go. What about you? Are you skirmishing much? Have you got many locals?
So we have the Gongai skirmish is next week. There's a skirmish going on right now, actually, at another store in Portland. But I think there's this weird skirmish almost came too fast. I think because we were hearing last night that there was only 8 people registered, and this store usually has some of the best turnout in the area. And now that doesn't mean more people didn't roll in at last minute today. I haven't seen the results, but like I think, and it was a draft skirmish. So there's a couple things. One, people are tired from competitive season and nationals, and then people are I don't think overall the community is as into Tails draft as I think everybody was hoping the community would be. That's just my personal opinion, but
I think sealed pools have jaded people a bit towards the draft element as well, and the prevalence of Briar in sealed has maybe put people off draft. I would say give draft a go. It's very different from sealed, and you can build an. In fact, I would say Briar's probably the lowest, not common denominator. So she probably has the lowest potential power level in draft. I think Lexi and Oldhim have huge ceilings. But yeah, give it a go. Definitely worth a go. But yeah, I think you're right. I think people are feeling a bit jaded. I definitely feel like I need to have a bit of a less intense period. I think that's a product of the Nationals being pushed a bit later in the year than maybe LSS expected due to the COVID break and lockdowns worldwide. So maybe next year will be slightly more spaced out, and that might give people a bit more time to adjust. But it does feel a bit quick.
Yeah,
I do feel like maybe competitive play now is not the main goal for most people.
Yeah, but I mean, the timing is what it is. Like, we're about to go into holidays, and then we'll have the new set drop, and then we'll have a new meta, and so I get it. This is just how I feel. You can hate me for it or not,
stop.
Right? So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Just doesn't stop. Yeah.
All right, well, great. So again, thank you for coming on. Why don't you go ahead and I've got the little logo up there, but why don't you go ahead and let us know where we can find you?
Yeah, check us out. Push the Point Podcast on YouTube and Spotify. And you can check out our podcasts every couple of weeks and some recent deck techs from top 8 in the UK.
Yep, highly recommended. Good listening. They also have a nice drop rate, so you don't always feel like you have to check in every day, which is nice. So
yeah, we try.
Awesome. Well, just one more time. This is Simon Denning, BigMedSi, top 8 UK, and a good dude. So thank you very much for joining today, and say it with me, man.
Thank you for having me.
Go Commando.
Go Commando.